Chapter 11. Their Finest Hour. It is inspiring and informative to read the stories of early LDS women who, from their heart and mind, delivered some of the most noble speeches for freedom ever recorded. Here in Salt Lake City, on a very inclement 13th of January in 1870, about 5 or 6,000 women packed the old tabernacle to present their feelings and support for what they considered to be a vitally important priesthood law, plural marriage. The Mormons had been suffering from the efforts of vicious mobs, prejudiced ministers, and corrupt politicians. Laws were being passed against the rights of the Mormons to live their religion unmolested. The Sisters of the Church wanted to make their stand. Only women were allowed to attend these statewide mass meetings except for a few press reporters. Mrs. Sarah M. Kimball, as president, was the first speaker. Excerpts from her talk, as well as the remarks of several others, are reprinted here as they appeared in Tullige's Women of Mormondom, showing the valiant defense of these pioneer women in behalf of this eternal priesthood law. We are not here to advocate woman's rights, but man's rights. The bill in question would not only deprive our fathers, husbands, and brothers of enjoying the privileges bequeathed to citizens of the United States, but it would deprive us, as women, of the privilege of selecting our husbands, and against this we unqualifiedly protest. Sarah M. Kimball, page 381. Bathsheba W. Smith remarked, I watched by the bedside of the first apostle, David W. Patton, who fell a martyr in the church. He was a noble soul. He was shot by a mob while defending the saints in the state of Missouri. I was intimately acquainted with the life and ministry of our beloved prophet, Joseph, and our patriarch Hiram Smith. I know that they were pure men who labored for the redemption of the human family. For 6 years I heard their public and private teachings. It was from their lips that I heard taught the principle of celestial marriage, and when I saw their mangled forms cold in death, having been slain for the testimony of Jesus, by the hands of cruel bigots, in defiance of law, justice, and executive pledges, I realized that they had sealed their ministry with their blood, and that their testimony was in force. On the 9th day of February, 1846, the middle of a cold and bleak winter, my husband, just rising from a bed of sickness, and I, in company with thousands of saints, were driven again from our comfortable home, the accumulation of 6 years' industry and prudence, and, with the little children, commenced a long and weary journey through the wilderness to seek another home. For a wicked mob had decreed we must leave. Governor Ford of Illinois said the laws were powerless to protect us. Exposed to the cold of winter and the storms of spring, we continued our journey, amid want and exposure, burying by the wayside a dead mother, a son, and many kind friends and relatives. We reached the Missouri River in July. Here our country thought proper to make a requisition upon us for a battalion to defend our national flag in the war pending with Mexico. We responded promptly, many of our kindred stepping forward and performing a journey characterized by their commanding officer as unparalleled in history. With most of our youths and middle-aged men gone, we could not proceed, hence we were compelled to make another home, which, though humble, approaching winter made very desirable. In 1847-8, all who were able, through selling their surplus property, proceeded. We who remained were told, by an unfeeling Indian department, we must vacate our houses and recross the Missouri River, as the laws would not permit us to remain on Indian lands. We obeyed, and again made a new home, though only a few miles distant. The latter home we abandoned in 1849, for the purpose of joining our co-religionists in the then far-off region, denominated on the map the Great American Desert, and had found an asylum in such an undesirable country as to strengthen us in the hope that no one could feel heartless enough to withhold from us that religious liberty which we had sought in vain amongst our former neighbors. I cannot but express my surprise, mingled with regret and indignation, at the recent efforts of ignorant, bigoted, and unfeeling men headed by the Vice President to aid intolerant sectarians and reckless speculators who seek for prescription and plunder, and who feel willing to rob the inhabitants of these valleys of their hard-earned possessions, and, what is dearer, the constitutional boon of religious liberty. Bathsheba W. Smith, pages 381 to 384. Sister Warren Smith, a survivor of the Haun's Mill massacre, reiterated that tragic story and then said, We are here today to say, if such scenes shall be again enacted in our midst, I say to you, my sisters, you are American citizens, let us stand by the truth, if we die for it. Sister Warren Smith, page 386. Mrs. Wilmerthies then spoke. It is with feelings of pleasure, mingled with indignation and disgust, that I appear before my sisters to express my feelings in regard to the Cullum Bill, now before the Congress of this once happy Republican government. The Constitution for which our forefathers fought and bled and died bequeaths to us the right of religious liberty, the right to worship God according to the dictates of our own conscience. Does the Cullum Bill give us this right? Compare it with the Constitution, if you please, and see what a disgrace has come upon this once happy and republican government. Where, oh, where is that liberty, bequeathed to us by our forefathers, the richest boon ever given to man or woman, except eternal life, or the gospel of the Son of God? I am an American citizen by birth. Having lived under the laws of the land, I claim the right to worship God according to the dictates of my conscience and the commandments that God shall give unto me. Our Constitution guarantees life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness to all who live beneath it. What is life to me, if I see the galling yoke of oppression placed on the necks of my husband, sons and brothers, as Mr. Cullum would have it? I am proud to say to you that I am not only a citizen of the United States of America, but a citizen of the kingdom of God, and the laws of this kingdom I am willing to sustain and defend both by example and precept. Mrs. Wilmarth East, pages 386-87. Sister Eliza R. Snow also addressed the meeting. The entrance of our brave pioneers and the settlement of the Latter-day Saints in these mountain vales, which then were only barren, savage wilds, are events with which not only our own future, but the future of the whole world, is deeply associated. Here they struggled, with more than mortal energy, for their hearts and hands were nerved by the Spirit of the Most High, and through His blessings, they succeeded in drawing sustenance from the arid soils. Here they erected the standard on which the Star-Spangled Banner waved its salutation of welcome to the nations of the earth, and here it will be bequeathed, unsullied, to future generations. Yes, that dear old flag which in my girlhood I always contemplated with joyous pride, and to which the patriotic strains of my earliest muse were chanted, here floats triumphantly on the mountain breeze. Our numbers, small at first, have increased until now we number 150,000, and yet we are allowed only a territorial government. Year after year we have petitioned Congress for that which is our inalienable right to claim a state government, and, year after year, our petitions have been treated with contempt. Such treatment as we have received from our rulers has no precedent in the annals of history. And now, instead of granting us our rights as American citizens, bills are being presented to Congress, which are a disgrace to men in responsible stations, professing the least claim to honor and magnanimity, bills which, if carried into effect, would utterly annihilate us as a people. In the kingdom of God, woman has no interests separate from those of man, all are mutual. Our enemies pretend that, in Utah, woman is held in a state of vassalage, that she does not act from choice, but by coercion, that we would even prefer life elsewhere, were it possible for us to make our escape. What nonsense! We all know that if we wished we could leave at any time, either to go singly, or to rise en masse, and there is no power here that could, or would wish to, prevent us. I will now ask this assemblage of intelligent ladies, do you know of any place on the face of the earth where woman has more liberty, and where she enjoys such high and glorious privileges as she does here, as a Latter-day Saint? No. The very idea of woman here in a state of slavery is a burlesque on good common sense. They must be very dull in estimating the energy of female character, who can persuade themselves that women who for the sake of their religion left their homes, crossed the plains with handcarts, or as many had previously done, drove ox, mule and horse teams from Nauvoo and from other points, when their husbands and sons went, at their country's call, to fight her battles in Mexico, yes, that very country which had refused us protection, and from which we were then struggling to make our escape. I say those who think that such women and the daughters of such women do not possess too much energy of character to remain passive and mute under existing circumstances, are reckoning without their host. To suppose that we should not be aroused when our brethren are threatened with fines and imprisonment for their faith in, and obedience to, the laws of God, is an insult to our womanly natures. Were we the stupid, degraded, heartbroken beings that we have been represented, silence might better become us, but as women of God, women filling high and responsible positions, performing sacred duties, women who stand not as dictators, but as counselors to their husbands, and who, in the purest, noblest sense of refined womanhood, are truly their helpmates, we not only speak because we have the right, but justice and humanity demand that we should. My sisters, let us, inasmuch as we are free to do all that love and duty prompt, be brave and unfaltering in sustaining our brethren. Women's faith can accomplish wonders. Let us, like the devout and steadfast Miriam, assist our brothers in upholding the hands of Moses. But to the law and to the testimony, those obnoxious fratricidal bills, I feel indignant at the thought that such documents should disgrace our national legislature. They not only threaten extirpation to us, but they augur destruction to the government. The authors of those bills would tear the Constitution to shreds. They are sapping the foundation of American freedom. They would obliterate every vestige of the dearest right of man, liberty of conscience, and reduce our once happy country to a state of anarchy. Eliza R. Snow, pages 388 to 393. Next came a very powerful speech by Harriet Cook Young. In rising to address this meeting, delicacy prompts me to explain the chief motives which have dictated our present action. We, the ladies of Salt Lake City, have assembled here today not for the purpose of assuming any particular political power, nor to claim any special prerogative which may or may not belong to our sex, but to express our indignation at the unhallowed efforts of men who, regardless of every principle of manhood, justice, and constitutional liberty, would force upon a religious community, by a direct issue, either the course of apostasy or the bitter alternative of fire and sword. Surely the instinct of self-preservation, the love of liberty and happiness, and the right to worship God, are dear to our sex as well as to the other, and when these most sacred of all rights are thus wickedly assailed, it becomes absolutely our duty to defend them. Let the world know that the women of Utah prefer virtue to vice, and the home of an honorable wife to the gilded pageantry of fashionable temples of sin. Transitory allurements, glaring the senses, as is the flame to the moth, short-lived and cruel in their results, possess no charms for us. Every woman in Utah may have her husband, the husband of her choice. Here we are taught not to destroy our children, but to preserve them, for they, reared in the path of virtue and trained to righteousness, constitute our true glory. It is with no wish to accuse our sisters who are not of our faith that we so speak, but we are dealing with facts as they exist. Wherever monogamy reigns, adultery, prostitution, and feticide, directly or indirectly, are its concomitants. It is not enough to say that the virtuous and high-minded frown upon these evils. We believe they do. But frowning upon them does not cure them. It does not even check their rapid growth. Either the remedy is too weak, or the disease is too strong. The women of Utah comprehend this, and they see, in the principle of plurality of wives, the only safeguard against adultery, prostitution, and the reckless waste of prenatal life practiced throughout the land. While these are our views, every attempt to force that obnoxious measure upon us must of necessity be an attempt to coerce us in our religious and moral convictions, against which, did we not most solemnly protest, we would be unworthy the name of American women. Harriet Cook Young, pages 394, 396-97. Sister Hannah T. King followed with a stinging address directed to General Cullum himself. My sisters, are we really in America, the world-renowned land of liberty, freedom, and equal rights? The land of which I dreamed in my youth as being almost an earthly Elysium, where freedom of thought and religious liberty were open to all. The land that Columbus wore his noble life out to discover. The land that God himself helped him to exhume and to aid, which endeavor Isabella, a queen, a woman, declared she would pawn her jewels and crown of Castile to give him the outfit that he needed. The land of Washington, the father of his country, and a host of noble spirits, too numerous to mention. The land to which the Mayflower bore the Pilgrim Fathers, who rose up and left their homes, and bade their native home good night, simply that they might worship God by a purer and holier faith, in a land of freedom and liberty, of which the name America has long been synonymous. Yes, my sisters, this is America, but oh, how are the mighty fallen! Who or what is the creature who framed this incomparable document? Is he an Eskimo or a chimpanzee? What isolated land or spot produced him? What ideas he must have of women? Had he ever a mother, a wife, or a sister? In what academy was he tutored, or to what school does he belong, that he so coolly and systematically commands the women of this people to turn traitors to their husbands, their brothers, and their sons? Short-sighted man-sections in the bill? Let us, the women of this people, the sisterhood of Utah, rise en masse, and tell this nondescript to defer the bill until he has studied the character of woman, such as God intended she should be. Then he will discover that devotion, veneration, and faithfulness are her peculiar attributes, that God is her refuge, and his servants her oracles, and that, especially, the women of Utah have paid too high a price for their present position, their present light and knowledge, and their noble future, to succumb to so mean and foul a thing as Baskin, Cullum, and Company's bill. Let them learn that they are one in heart, hand, and brain, with the brotherhood of Utah, that God is their father, and their friend, that into his hands they commit their cause, and on their pure and simple banner they have emblazoned their motto, God and my right. Hannah T. King, pages 397-99. The next speaker was Phoebe Woodruff. I have been a member of this church for 36 years and had the privilege of living in the days of the prophet Joseph and heard his teaching for many years. He ever counseled us to honor, obey, and maintain the principles of our noble Constitution, for which our fathers fought and which many of them sacrificed their lives to establish. President Brigham Young has always taught the same principle. This glorious legacy of our fathers, the Constitution of the United States, guarantees unto all the citizens of this great republic the right to worship God according to the dictates of their own consciences, as it expressly says, Congress shall make no laws respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Cullum's bill is in direct violation of this declaration of the Constitution, and I think it is our duty to do all in our power, by our voices and influence, to thwart the passage of this bill, which commits a violent outrage upon our rights, and the rights of our fathers, husbands, and sons. Shall we, as wives and mothers, sit still and see our husbands and sons, whom we know are obeying the highest behest of heaven, suffer for their religion, without exerting ourselves to the extent of our power for their deliverance? No, verily no. God has revealed unto us the law of the patriarchal order of marriage, and commanded us to obey it. We are sealed to our husbands for time and eternity, that we may dwell with them and our children in the world to come, which guarantees unto us the greatest blessing for which we are created. If the rulers of the nation will so far depart from the spirit and letter of our glorious Constitution, as to deprive our prophets, apostles, and elders of citizenship, and imprison them for obeying this law, let them grant this, our last request, to make their prisons large enough to hold their wives, for where they go we will go also. Phoebe Woodruff, pages 399 to 400. Sister Eliza R. Snow gave the concluding remarks. I heard the prophet Joseph Smith say if the people rose and mobbed us and the authorities countenanced it, they would have mobs to their heart's content. I heard him say that the time would come when this nation would so far depart from its original purity, its glory, and its love of freedom and protection of civil and religious rights, that the Constitution of our country would hang as it were by a thread. He said also that this people, the sons of Zion, would rise up and save the Constitution and bear it off triumphantly. I consider it most important, my sisters, that we should struggle to preserve the sacred Constitution of our country, one of the blessings of the Almighty, for the same spirit that inspired Joseph Smith inspired the framers of the Constitution, and we should ever hold it sacred and bear it off triumphantly. Eliza R. Snow, pages 401 to 402. What noble lives of faith and integrity these pioneer women left for men! By precept and example they displayed the finest qualities of mortal souls. They passed on the torch of liberty for later generations to carry and respect. It is up to us to continue in that path and march on in support of those eternal priesthood goals and principles.